She cried out before the rope even touched her skin, the kind of cry that makes every bird in the meadow spring from the grass and disappear into the sky, the kind of cry that suggests someone is being damaged in a way no human heart should ever observe. They had Alice Byrne fastened to the old whipping post near the route to Dodge City. Her hands were pulled high above her head, her ankles tied to the bottom of the post, her feet barely touching the ground. Her simple garment was torn at the shoulder from the struggle. Covered in dust and moisture, the sun beat down on her until sweat and tears ran together into one helpless flow. She attempted to pull her arms down, but the rope dug deeper into her wrists, turning every breath into a reminder that half the county could have been watching if they drove by that route. Her breath caught. She whispered one word, "Please." Her voice cracked in the heat. Anyone passing that old route would have heard her, but no one came, and that silence caused worse suffering than the rope. The men who surrounded her did not flinch. They watched with relaxed grins, their boots sinking into the dusty soil near the old cattle path leading toward Dodge City. These men worked for Cyrus Maddox, the man everyone feared, the man who decided that Alice needed to be taught a lesson for speaking against him in town, and they were more than willing to carry out his commands. Then footsteps approached from behind her, heavy, slow, measured. The men stepped aside as Ethan Carter entered the clear area. Ethan was 50, broad-shouldered, aged from decades of ranching along the Arkansas River. His face carried old sorrow and older mistakes, and he looked at Alice the way a convicted man looks at a rope. For a moment, Alice thought he might assist her, but despair can twist a good man into something he no longer recognizes, like he disliked what he was about to do but saw no way to escape it. Cyrus had come to Ethan 2 nights earlier, presenting him with a deal. Help with this penalty, and Cyrus would clear the debt that threatened to destroy the Carter farm. Refuse, and everything Ethan owned would be taken from him by sunrise. So Ethan had walked here today, not because he wished to, but because desperation drove him harder than fear. Now Cyrus gave his commands, as cold as winter metal. "Lift her clear off the ground, Carter. I want her toes moving lightly in the air when the ropes bite. That's your part of the agreement." Ethan's stomach churned, but his hands moved regardless. He slipped them under her thighs and raised her. Alice came up hard against the ropes, a stifled cry tearing out of her throat as the hemp cut deeper into her wrists and ankles. Her whole body shook with the strain and the shame of being strung up like fresh meat for every passing rider to see. Her eyes found his, wide, wet, pleading, "Please don't do this." The words barely left her lips before Cyrus laughed again. Ethan felt every year of his 50 winters in that moment, and something inside him broke cleanly in two. He did not know it yet, but this was the moment his whole life would swing in a different direction. If a man is forced to choose between saving his own life and saving a stranger's worth, what does he become when he selects the wrong choice? Alice froze when Ethan's arms suddenly lowered just a little. It was the first sign that something was wrong, the first sign that the man holding her up was not as faithful to Cyrus as Cyrus believed. Ethan kept his hands under her legs, but his grip shifted, and she could feel the tension in him like a storm building under his skin. The sun pounded down on both of them. Sweat dripped from his temples. His breathing grew heavier with every second he fought the thing he knew he should not be doing. She stared at him, eyes still wet, voice trembling. "You still have a decision." Her whisper barely reached him, but somehow it struck harder than any command Cyrus ever gave. Ethan shut his eyes for a moment, just long enough to let regret wash over him. When he opened them again, something inside him had altered. It was small, barely present, but it was genuine, the kind of change that only becomes bigger when a man realizes he's about to lose the last piece of himself behind him. Cyrus laughed. It was a slow, heavy laugh, the kind a man uses when he believes he owns every soul in the clear area. He stepped closer, his boots crunching on the dry grass. "Hurry up, Ethan. We have all day, but the girl does not." Alice flinched at the words. Ethan did too, though he tried to conceal it. Anyone older than 45 has heard that kind of man before, the kind who enjoys watching others yield, the kind who believes fear is a present that only he can give. Ethan's shoulders tensed. He lifted Alice again, but this time his legs shook in a way Cyrus could not see from behind. Alice felt it. She whispered again, "You are not like them." Ethan let out a rough breath, the kind you release when you finally admit something to yourself. He had spent years believing he was too old to make a difference, too tired to fight, too broken to try. But right now, with Alice trembling in his arms, he understood one simple truth. You never stop choosing who you are. Even at 50. One of Cyrus's men stepped forward. "Tired. Want me to pull the ropes tighter, boss?" Cyrus waved him away. "Let Ethan finish. He owes me this." The words cut deeper than Ethan expected. He felt shame rush up his spine. Shame for agreeing. Shame for letting it go this far. Shame for seeing himself through Cyrus's eyes. And that was the moment Ethan finally asked himself the question that changed everything. If he kept doing this, would he ever be able to look at himself in the mirror again? Ethan did not answer that question aloud. He did not have to. His body answered for him. One moment he was lifting Alice because Cyrus ordered it. The next moment he dropped his weight low, pulled her legs toward him, and twisted hard enough to loosen the rope on her right ankle. The rope snapped against the post, and Alice gasped as her legs swung free. For a split second the meadow went silent. Even the wind forgot to move. It was the kind of stillness that comes right before a storm hits a man harder than a bullet. Then everything exploded. One of Cyrus's men lunged first. Ethan shoved Alice to the side to keep her out of the path, then took a hard hit to the jaw and another straight into his ribs. Something cracked inside his chest and white pain shot through him. He grabbed the man's shirt, turned his weight, and slammed him into the dirt. The hit was clumsy, but it worked, and Ethan felt his own knees wobble from the effort. If he fell here, Alice would not last a minute, and Ethan knew it better than anyone. He was 50. He already knew he would pay for this when the sun went down. The second man seized Alice by the arm. She kicked him with her free leg, a sharp, wild kick born from fear and pure determination. He did not fall, but he did loosen his grip just enough for Ethan to crash into him from the side, sending them both stumbling in the dust. Ethan tried to stand straight, but pain tore at his ribs and his breath came out in short, rough gasps. Ethan felt a rush of something he had not felt in years. Pride. Not in himself, but in her, in the way she refused to break. Cyrus finally moved, shouting at his men, furious that his little performance had turned into a fight. His face twisted and he reached for the rifle tied to his saddle. Ethan saw the motion. He charged forward, planting his shoulder into the ribs of the closest man, knocking him into Cyrus before the rifle could be raised. The gun hit the dirt. Alice scrambled toward it, still tripping on the rope tied to her wrist. She snatched the rifle up and worked the lever like someone who'd grown up on a ranch. Ethan covered her, swinging at another man who rushed in. His knuckles split. His breathing turned rough, but something in him refused to stop. Every blow he threw felt like he was clawing his way back to the man he used to be. Alice finally freed her other foot. She stumbled toward Ethan just as Cyrus pushed himself up from the ground, his face red, his voice shaking with fury. "You are making the biggest error of your life, Ethan Carter." Ethan spat blood into the dirt. "Maybe, but at least it is mine to make." The two of them ran toward Ethan's horse while the remaining men tried to recover. Dust lifted behind their boots, their hands fumbled with the reins as they mounted, and as the horse kicked off into the open prairie, one question remained. The prairie can save you or consume you whole, and neither of them had any idea which one they were riding into. If this is the escape, what on earth awaits them next? If you were enjoying this story, feel free to tap subscribe so you never miss the next chapter. Grab a warm cup of tea, relax with me, and tell me what time it is where you were listening from and what town you were in. The horse ran like it understood their lives depended on it. Ethan held the reins tight, his arm wrapped around Alice so she would not fall. Her breath shook against his shoulder. She kept looking back every few seconds, expecting to see empty prairie. But trouble never disappears that easily. A cloud of dust rose on the far edge of the land. Cyrus's men were coming, there was no doubt about it, and they were angry enough to make the whole county tremble. Ethan mumbled under his breath, "Hold on." Alice clung to him, still shaken from the fight, still trying to figure out how a rancher she barely knew had become the only thing standing between her and a shallow grave. The horse raced along the Arkansas River, hooves pounding the ground in a steady beat, almost like a heartbeat. For a moment, Alice let herself breathe. The wind cooled her face, the river shone beside them. She allowed herself to think they might actually get away. But hope is a dangerous thing on the frontier. It never comes without a cost. Then Ethan noticed the danger. Ahead of them was a narrow wooden bridge. It stretched across the river like a thin piece of hope. But on the far side stood two riders. They were waiting, guns resting on their saddles, their faces as cold as stone. Ethan cursed softly. He pulled the horse to the right, heading down toward a patch of tall grass and scattered cottonwoods. Alice looked at him. What now? Ethan forced a smile that tried to hide how worried he really was. Now we make it hard for him. They slid off the horse and moved into the shadows of the trees. Ethan pushed the reins into Alice's hands. Keep him close. She nodded, even though her legs were still shaking. The riders separated. One moved toward the riverbank. The other walked his horse straight toward Ethan. The man got off his horse and marched forward, cracking his knuckles like he enjoyed the sound. Ethan stepped out from behind a cottonwood, fists clenched. The man grinned. You should have remained on the farm, old man. Ethan answered with a punch, a heavy punch, the kind a man throws when he has nothing left to lose. They fought hard. Fists hit ribs, boots hit dirt. Alice watched from behind a fallen log, her heart racing. She wanted to help, but fear held her motionless. Then another rider spotted her. He raised his gun. Alice froze. She had barely enough time to gasp before Ethan saw the man too. Ethan shouted her name. The rider prepared the hammer, and in that split second, Alice realized something terrifying. What if Ethan saves her again, but this time he does not walk away alive? The thought hit her so hard her knees gave way, and suddenly escape did not matter as much as keeping him breathing. The gunshot never came. At the last possible second, Ethan threw himself toward Alice, grabbing her by the arm and pulling her behind a cottonwood just as the rider fired. Bark exploded over their heads. The man tried to shoot again, but Ethan was already charging him. He tackled the rider into the dirt, grabbed a handful of his coat, and hit him with everything he had left. The rider groaned, rolled over, and stayed down. Alice stared, breathless, shaken, almost unable to believe that Ethan had endangered his life for her again. The last rider saw the other man down in the dirt, and Ethan standing there, shirt torn, blood on his face, one hand pressed to his ribs, the other lifting the fallen rifle. Ethan's eyes were dark and steady, the kind of look a man gets when he has already decided he's not fleeing anymore. The rider hesitated, swallowed hard, then yanked his reins and turned his horse. He did not say a word. He just rode off across the prairie as if the devil himself was at his back. His shape grew smaller across the prairie until the grass swallowed him whole. For the first time since sunrise, the world finally stopped trying to kill him. The clear area fell quiet. The river whispered beside them. Alice walked to Ethan, her voice soft and full of relief. You saved me twice today. Ethan let out a tired laugh. I hope that means I'm learning something. She touched his arm, gentle and thankful. He met her eyes, and for the first time that day, neither of them looked away. They left the riverbank together and found an old shelter, half fallen in on itself, tucked beneath a stand of cottonwoods. The roof leaked in 2 places, and half the windows were missing, but it had 4 walls and a fireplace made of river stone. Ethan cleaned his cuts while Alice covered his shoulder the best she could, her fingers awkward from the cold. The room was not warm, it was just less cold than the night outside. Every time he moved, pain stabbed through his ribs, and he had to hold back a groan once when he thought she was not looking. He coughed, and a faint trace of red stained the cloth in his hand. After a long stretch of silence, Alice checked the rag at his side and frowned. You are bleeding through the rag again. Ethan looked down, then gave a small, tired smile. Seen worse. She shook her head. Maybe, but not on my watch. It was not much, but in a place as rough as Kansas, that was how faith began. They let the silence settle again while the fire cracked and popped, saying more than either of them felt like saying out loud. You never outgrow the chance to be better than you were yesterday. You never get too old to choose the right thing. And sometimes saving someone else is what saves you too. The fire crackled between them, and Alice rested her head on his shoulder. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt peace, real peace, the kind a man earns through dust and bruises and the stubborn decision to do what is right. Before they slept, Alice whispered a question. What would have happened if you had not changed your mind back there? Ethan looked at the fire. I guess I would still be the man I was running from. I suppose every man gets one day in his life when he has to decide what kind of man he's willing to die as. Ethan got his on a hot piece of Kansas prairie in the summer of 1883. When is yours coming? Now, let me ask you, listening at home, have you ever faced a moment where doing the right thing felt more difficult than doing nothing? And which one did you choose? If you're enjoying this story, tap like so I know you're here with us. And if you want more honest tales from the old American West, feel free to subscribe. Grab a warm drink, settle in, and tell me where you were listening from.